I'm Mehdi, and welcome to your Finance TV's Crypto Revolution, where we cover all things crypto and digital assets. There's always lots and lots to talk about in this world of crypto. But before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to stay on top of our content. And always feel free to drop us a line. We can talk about anything you want us to talk about. Adam, how you been? It's been a couple of weeks since we last spoke.
It's been a couple of weeks, Mehdi, and even though they've been relatively slow weeks, always something to talk about in crypto.
That's for sure. And you know what? Last week, well, we weren't around. There was definitely a bit of a caution in the world of Bitcoin for sure. And then, yeah, that was Bitcoin catching a cold and everyone else following suit. So, we had a bit of a big sell-off last Thursday. It was being largely attributed to Elon Musk, SpaceX writing down their Bitcoin holdings. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen a bit more of a recovery from this, but that is what it is. Doesn't necessarily mean that he sold his whole position though. Writing down and selling off aren't necessarily exactly the same thing. Don't you think?
No, I think what we found is they were just writing down the position because the value went down. Right there, I don't believe there was any evidence that showed that they actually sold a bunch of their Bitcoin. I think it was just the value is lower today than it was at the last point that they reported on it. Remember, SpaceX is not a publicly traded company, so they don't have to report their holdings very often. So I think it was just writing it down. But the implication, as we see so often with crypto, is I'm going to make a quick move right now, and then I'm going to go back and parse through and figure out what happened because it's a 24/7, 365 asset traded all over the world. That's what we see. And that's actually kind of a problem that leads to the volatility. Even though it's something we like about Bitcoin, the most liquid asset ever, it can also lead to problems like this that says a few people decide here's what the news is, and they start selling, and that just causes this cascade of selling.
And throw in the fact that it's August doldrums and across all financial markets, everyone's quite quiet on pulling the trigger on things. So, yeah, but we did see a bit of a positive emerge during that period last week. Volumes looked to have picked up according to Coinbase Offshore derivatives exchange. They saw a surge close towards $300 million a day. And I believe it was August the 18th was their big day, which was kind of tied into the timing with Elon Musk's SpaceX news. So, granted, we've definitely drifted back aggressively since then, but it's a little bit of a coincidence with the Musk news, would you say?
Maybe a little bit of a coincidence, but yeah, you're right. Coinbase, launched their derivatives market elsewhere in the world, obviously not in the U.S., and it's done really well. Of course, other places in the world have more regulation around crypto. They also have more people, more kind of financial professionals, institutions that are involved in crypto. So the derivatives are really important elsewhere in the world, and they're being utilized. And this is a case, Mehdi, which we'll talk about over and over again, probably in this session that we have here today. And in so many of the past, we end up talking about Coinbase so much. And what I think is so impressive, as we'll talk here, is Coinbase in the face of what's happening with them in the SEC, getting sued by the SEC, countersuing the SEC, all these things going on. Coinbase is just plowing forward with more news, with more offerings, with more products, with getting into the crypto world more and building that. And it's really impressive how they don't sit back and wait for a ruling or something. They just say, look, we're going to plow forward. And it's almost like they're trying to make themselves too big to fail. They're trying to make themselves too important to fail for the SEC.
Well, one of the things that's come out this week as well is Coinbase acquiring a stake in Circle, dissolving USDC's issuer center. Talk us through this because this to me is Brian Armstrong playing the long game, and he's diversifying revenue streams, etc., and he's building, as you say, something that could potentially be too big to fail. So, talk us through your thoughts on this.
I think it's important, as you said, it's building the revenue streams, right? Circle is just creating a crazy amount of money right now, crazy amount of revenue, and the reason is because I give Circle $1 and they turn that into one US dollar coin, one USDC, and they get to go invest that dollar how they want. Now they've been investing it in treasuries and repos and such, and they've been earning 5% risk free on my dollar so that I can trade a digital dollar, so that I can trade a USDC. So they've just been earning a ton of money, hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter, I believe. And Coinbase has been a small part of that because they helped issue USDC to start. They helped work with Circle to start with, and they formed this governance group called Center, which was a combination of Coinbase and Circle. And so now what they've said is we're dissolving Center. Circle is going to be in charge. So sorry, all these C words, right? Circle is going to be in charge of the issuance and kind of the management of USDC. Coinbase is taking an equity interest in Circle now. So they're going to get a piece of that revenue stream that comes from just investing dollars that are being used to convert to USDC. What I think it also is, Mehdi, is probably somewhere Coinbase and Circle going, okay, from a regulatory perspective, if we look at what's happening with stable coins elsewhere in the world with stablecoin regulation, and we look at what might happen in the US, we can't have this kind of vague third party called Center that's kind of Circle and kind of Coinbase managing this. It has to be kind of one entity managing it because that's who's going to get regulated. And if we have this vagueness, there might be a problem in the future with this major stablecoin. So that might play into it a little bit as well.
So this is bringing us to Coinbase being king of the world at some point, the way they're going along. So good for you, Brian Armstrong. Keep up all the battles with the SEC and other regulators, and keep on plugging because you are. Do you know who's not participating in any of this? Is a name that we haven't spoken about in a while. SPF, our old friend Sam Bankman-Fried. He has had his bail revoked by a judge arguing that his bail conditions were insufficient. It sounds like he was allegedly witness tampering and other such things, which have led him to now being fully incarcerated, I believe. And things are getting tougher for him. What do you think? Do you think this was the right thing? Was this inevitable? Yeah, it sounds like it was kind of inevitable.
I don't know if it was inevitable. I don't know enough about what's the legal side of his case and such. But apparently, what happened was he kind of leaked Caroline Ellison's diary, and she, of course, is a witness in his case, and he kind of leaked it to the press. And the judge said, "You can't go doing things like that. You're tampering. You're creating this bias with what might be a witness. And if you're going to be at home and you're going to have access to a computer and the internet, we can't let you do this. Therefore, we're revoking your bail. You got to go hang out in jail until we have this trial because we can't trust you out on your own." And I believe what this also means is those that, put up the collateral for his bail don't get their money back. Right. So his parents and their Stanford friends that put up this bail money are out that $1 million, I believe.
That's interesting.
I feel like is probably well deserved, to be honest.
That's definitely that's going to upset some people, ruffle some feathers. Well, Sam, we're thinking about you. Don't drop the soap and try and behave a little bit. So that's one of the downsides of being nefarious in this industry. So those of you watching who are thinking about doing something bad, don't do it. Keep
right. And you're right, Mehdi. Look, it's kind of a case of a guy who never thought he would get in trouble, right? It's very Hollywood-esque as a person who grew up with wealth and grew up with privilege and everything, going, whatever I do, mommy and daddy will help. I'm not going to get bailed out. I'm a white guy from the Stanford area. My parents are Stanford professors. Like, nothing bad's going to happen to me. I can do whatever I want. And even after he got caught and after he got arrested and after he had bail and was on home arrest, still kept doing things that he probably knew weren't that good. But the thought was like, how much can this hurt? And now he's probably sitting in jail going, now I see that I guess I can get put in jail and bad things can happen to me.
Yeah. Maybe he'll change his tune when he's testifying in court next. So a bit of humility might be there. This has definitely been a summer focused on Bitcoin spot ETFs and Ethereum futures ETFs, and there's all sorts of ETFs going in and out of the world. And SEC kind of seems to be sitting on top of everything. There's major, there's mixed thoughts around if these will both happen, if they're going to happen, when they're going to happen. There seems to be deadlines being pushed out further and further. But it's definitely a major catalyst. And the SEC, it feels like, obviously could make or break a lot of this. The next set of deadlines is September. Do we sit there, dead in the water with Bitcoin at 26,000 until we have another catalyst here?
It seems like there's not a whole lot of reason for those with money to start jumping in and buying, right? Because there's nothing that's really pushing the price up. We're seeing a lot of things that can push the price down. Obviously, a spot ETF getting approved would likely push the price up, but there's no real catalyst right now anywhere in the world, whether it's in the macro environment or a micro environment or something specific to Bitcoin or whatever it might be. There's no real catalyst we're seeing. What I think is going to happen is the SEC has the opportunity to keep pushing these approvals down the road and down the road, right? They get 45 days and 45 days and 90 days and whatever it might be. And I think the total is like 240 days they can wait before they absolutely have to either approve or deny a spot ETF. And I think the first ones that they would have to look at are ARK and 21 shares. I believe theirs would be first in January, and the BlackRock and those others would be March. So they can just keep kicking the can down the road if they want to. And that's what they did with ARK last week, is they said, look, we're going to delay because we either have to approve, deny, or delay, and we're just going to delay. And maybe they're waiting to see what happens with some of the court cases with Grayscale and with Ripple and such. Or maybe they're just saying, look, it's too big right now for us to make a decision at this moment.
Well, we'll see. And Chair Gensler has certainly got a spotlight on him, so needs to start figuring some things out along the way. But
Right.
a story that caught my eye that I really liked the look of was to do with the BRICS currency, gold-backed BRICS currency, and BRICS, the term that I believe was coined by Goldman years ago. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But it's the idea to create a common currency backed by gold. But there's a lot of question marks on whether this would be maintainable and the type of, and also for the crypto enthusiasts, what sort of impact would it have on Bitcoin? What do you think around this whole BRICS currency?
Right. Well, I've obviously read a bit about it. So what I'm going to, tell you is based on some of the really, really smart people that I've heard talking about it. But it seems like it's not really doable. I think it's something that Vladimir Putin floated out there because obviously he doesn't want to be beholden to the dollar. As a matter of fact, he can't use dollars right now. So he definitely wants to have some alternative currency, and the idea of backing it with gold, I think is, I guess, what he or his advisors probably came up with to say, look, no one's going to trust a Russian back, a currency that Russia or China or India just decides to issue. So we got to back it with something. The question is there enough gold for them to, hoard or hold in order to issue a currency against? And is that going to make sense? And I don't think there is. And most experts don't think there's enough gold and don't think something like this, would work. The impact it might have on Bitcoin is saying that, look, what we've already seen is there is likely less demand for dollars, and there's going to be less demand for dollars. The BRICS nations have already said we're happy to trade with each other and not denominate in dollars and not use dollars. The lower demand for the dollar means that the US has to keep raising interest rates, basically trying to bribe us to go buy the dollars, right? And as interest rates creep up in risk investments like Bitcoin, like equities, whatever it might be, are likely going to go down in value because I have an alternative. I can make 5% on treasuries doing absolutely nothing and taking no risk. So why am I going to take the risk on equities? Why am I going to take the risk on anything else when I can earn 5%? We talked earlier about how much money Circle is making by just taking my dollar, converting it into something digital, and then investing my dollars. They're just minting money. We're seeing so many even on-chain organizations buying digitized versions of treasuries right now. So all of that is to say, when there's a decreased demand for the dollar, it's not, even though we think that would help the price of Bitcoin, I think in the short term, it probably hurts because there's an alternative, right? It means that as Bitcoin and ETH and everything else is behaving just like other equities, just like other risk assets, and not based kind of on their own merits, what we see is people choosing, I'm either going to invest in something that has some risk to it, or I'm going to go the risk-free option and earn my 5 to 5.5% on treasuries and call it a day. right? And so that's kind of, I think, what we're seeing. And if we go back to our earlier discussion of why there are these headwinds, why Bitcoin had that big drop on news that wasn't really news but never recovered, was there's no reason for it to. There's no good, there's not a whole lot of good happening in the world of Bitcoin, other than we still have some inflation, other than, the Bitcoin is still being printed, Bitcoin's still working, people still using it, all of those things. But in the short term, there's nothing that is a catalyst that's moving that price.
So a little bit of an ending on blah, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those.
Sometimes the news isn't always good, Mehdi. News is news, right?
That's it. News is news. Adam, I missed this. It's great to be back with you, and I appreciate, as always, listening to your views and thoughts on the world of digital assets. And you can educate us in the world of crypto. And that leads me to remind people, don't forget to check out Adam's course on digital assets and crypto education, interaxis.io. It's down there. Check it out. Adam, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Mehdi.
And everyone else, don't forget, check things out and good luck investing.